Assalamu alaikum. Me Sarah. I'm going to be talking in English, I'm sorry. I'm representing Afar Youth Association along with Hassan. For those of you who've never heard of us, we are a group of young people from countries all over the world, and we believe that it's time for our generation to get involved in the betterment of our people, both back home and in the diaspora. Since last Afar Forum, we've learned the hard way that getting our people active is the toughest thing in the world, but we've been very pleased with the overwhelming support that we've met. Last time I was here, I mentioned that Afar Youth Association is meant for the youth, and that the youth should be able to define it. So what we did was we held a meeting in Sweden, and we've had numerous of Skype meetings with people from France and Finland and Germany, to name a few, where the majority seem to agree on the fact that we should start off with getting the youth together and making sure that we create a stronger bond between the Afar youth across the borders we're living in. And we thought this would be a great idea, but we also thought about how that would be possible if there is a language barrier. So, is it up? Yeah, so we have a few questions that we would like to pose to you. The first one is, how many of you have difficulties teaching your children the Afar language? And that goes to the parents, obviously. So raise your hands. Yeah?
Everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah. And the next one is, how many of you here can read and write in the Afar language? And raise your hands again. Cool. Next slide. Yeah, so we'll start off with telling our journey to the Afar language, and I'm gonna start. I was born in Denmark, and back then there were only 2 families in the whole of Denmark. That meant that learning Afar for me depended on my parents. For example, my mom would take that very, very seriously, and she would be very strict about it. Like I would, for example, come home from school and knock on the door. She would open it, I would walk in, and I would be telling her stories in Danish about my day. And she would look at me when I finished and say, "Atu jij?" And I would be like, "I'm Sarah." And she would be like, "Sarah." I'm like, "Yay, kubara." Like, and she would be like, "Yay, ano yi Sarah, afara fahiyattaka, atu yarika we'ahi." And she would literally kick me out of the house, have me knocking on the door again, and I would walk in, and I would be like, "Hi, Mom," and say the whole thing again in Afar. So back then, I didn't get the point. I thought it was very annoying. And it was not before I went to Afar Forum 2012, where I actually met our people, that I understood the whole point of that. And I remember thanking her and kissing her on the forehead, because that just meant the world to me, and I understood the meaning and the importance of knowing your language. So now I'll be giving the word to my fellow.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hassan Chehem. I was born in Djibouti. I moved to the United States when I was 7 years old. And in that time, I was fortunate enough that I had siblings who... It's very important that we're speaking in English, and I'll explain that later. I think being in the United States and living in a small white town with 6 of my siblings has meant that I was away from my culture, away from my religion, and away from my language in some ways. And before we left Djibouti, my father made my brother promise that if you're going to take my kids, make sure that they hold on to their language, their culture, and their religion. And I think my siblings have done a great job of staying true to those 3 things. And when I was younger, going to middle school, elementary school, and high school, the ability to speak Afar fully was not there. Spent 8 hours at school, came home, you have homework. And so between that, what time do you have to actually learn the language and to converse in that language? But in 2012, I had the opportunity to go back to Djibouti. And at that time, my culture, everything came back to me. The ability to speak came back to me. And so after that summer, I came here for the 2012 Afar conference. And I was one of those people who came here and said, what is this conference? What are we doing here? Are we really accomplishing anything? I looked at us, I looked at the youth and said, what can we contribute? And so we put together the Afar Youth Association and said, hey, here's an opportunity. Yeah, I'll go ahead and speak to that. But I think for me, coming to that conference and going back to Djibouti has instilled in me the need to learn my language, to read in it, to write in it. And there's a Afar dictionary that costs $200. I bought the Afar English translation and English Afar translation and spent my weekends at the library self-teaching. That has kind of been my journey. And right now, I think we're both confident enough one-on-one to speak in Afar, but obviously not to this wide group. So, as you saw in the first slide, Rita Mae Brown once said, language is the roadmap of culture. It tells you where its people come from and where they're going. And that is very important. Today, there's about 7,000 languages spoken globally. And of those 7,000, every 14 days, a language dies. That's very important. We live in a world that's over 7 billion people, and native Afar speakers sit at 3.5 million people. When you actually look at the global, that's not a lot, you know? And you take into account the global Afar diaspora, and with each generation that comes, there's less and less tied to the language, the culture, and in some ways, the religion. And so, what is lost when we can't carry on that language? When our kids who are born here can't speak Afar, what is lost? Our language, our culture, Adai. There are many reasons why languages die. It's political, economical, and cultural. Speakers of minority languages may, for example, decide that it's better to teach their children languages that have closer ties to economic success and educational success. So right now in the United States, the vast majority of second generation immigrants, so these are young people who are born, most of my nieces and nephews who are born in the US, have less ties and don't speak the Afar language fluently. They can't read, they can't write, and they can't speak in it. But in some ways, they can understand it. So the reason for that is when we have our youth in the diaspora, it's more important for them to speak in English, or in Danish for that matter, to prosper economically in this country. And so we call these the working languages. English, Mandarin will be one, Spanish. These are global languages, even French. These are languages that we do business with. And so it makes sense that people would learn that language and leave a mother tongue like Afar behind. And so what we're here to do is hopefully make sure that doesn't happen. Right now, if Afar youth in diaspora want to learn the Afar language, here are some of the opportunities and some of the tools that they have for that. These are 3 websites that I personally have used in learning the Afar language. And this is basically, kind of in some ways gives you the ability to read, write, and pronounce in some ways. And then this video right here is done by a woman in Canada, and it's visual, so some people learn better by visually. And so she points to the different things on the human face, and she has a lot of these videos that are very helpful in pronunciating certain words. But what we're here today to talk to you about is a language application that's called Duolingo. It's one of those apps where I can learn the whole Afar language just using this day to day. By this application, I would spend 30 hours a day, is the equivalent of a semester-long course in a foreign language.
Everybody agrees, Duolingo is a great way to learn a language. It's addictive because languages are split into bite-sized skills that feel like games. You lose a life when you get something wrong, and you earn points when you complete a lesson. Duolingo teaches you to read, write, listen, and speak, and it's extremely effective. In fact, an independent study found that 34 hours on Duolingo are equal to a whole university semester. A semester of knowledge that you can fit into your breaks, commutes, and moments spent waiting in line. Duolingo is completely free. No annoying ads, no misleading in-app purchases, no subscription fees. Language, free at last.
All right, so what is Duolingo? So, what is Duolingo? Duolingo is a language learning application which learners are able to read, write, and pronounce in the language that they're learning. Today you will find hundreds of language applications that cater to other languages, but you won't find a single one that caters to the Afar language. And sure, we have websites, as I showed you, and we have YouTube videos that can teach us, but what we know is that those are old ways of learning languages, and it doesn't work for a lot of people. The ability to sit down at a computer for hours just doesn't do it for a lot of people, and to watch YouTube videos is not the same. And so what the Duolingo app does is that it has a language incubator, which basically means that it's a platform where people could, right now, if I wanted to learn French as a native English speaker, I could do that. And so what this allows is for us to input the Afar language in the applications. So everything's already there. All we have to do is put vocabulary, sentences, everything in there. And it's honestly easy as using your phone, wherever you are. And what's cool about this application is that it's gamified, which means it's like playing a game. And so it's addictive, and it's something that young people can utilize, especially young people in the diaspora. So Language Incubator provides users a platform and provides them necessary tools to build a new language. And so basically what they want is people who are experts in the native language and people who have passion to pursue that language. And the tool that they use is called crowdsourcing. And so what we have to do is find, so basically what we're looking for is someone who's passionate in the Afar language, and someone who has fluency in the Afar language, someone that can read, write, and speak in the language. And we're also looking for people who have skills in the English language, not necessarily fluency, but the ability to read, write, and speak, and translate certain phrases to a degree. And how you can contribute to this. Yeah, so I guess what's important with this application is the initial platform will be Afar for English speakers, so you would have to know English to learn the Afar language. And if that gets approved, we can move on to, for example, someone who's a native Danish speaker who can learn Afar. And we can flip that over and say a person who has Afar native language can learn English, can learn French, can learn Danish. It's that simple. Because the tools are already there, all we need to do is input the information. It's in there, and it's completely free. And so on our end, we know that this application is here, that it's free, but Sarah and myself we're not very fluent in the Afar language, and we can read and write and speak to a certain degree, but we also know that there's a difference in the language of the Afar people in Djibouti, in Ethiopia, and Eritrea. And so we are looking for variations in pronunciations and certain phrases. Obviously certain dialects. And so what you can do to help us out is, first, if you have anyone that knows the Afar language fluently, who can speak, read, and write in it, who also is fluent in English. So this could be 3 to 5 people from different parts of the country, and we would spend 3 to 4 months putting that information into the application. And from there, it goes into a phase called beta phase, which is the second phase, which allows us to pick people that we're going to use to test the application. And so we get a list of people and send that out. You would try that, and so we'd send it to people in Djibouti, Canada, Ethiopia, and get them to correct certain things that are wrong, or certain words that are wrong. And then the final phase is when it gets put out for the masses. And so the importance of this application is that there are thousands and thousands. There are 7,000 languages on the world, and there's thousands of people who are vying to get their language on this application. And I think what's unique to the Afar community is that we are a community that's struggling. We are a community that's struggling in more than one way. And so for us, the ability to come to a common ground on this, because everyone has a child, everyone in the diaspora has a child who is probably struggling, and you're struggling with teaching them how to do this. And so her brother, for example, plays video games. Leila's sister also uses this application, Duolingo. My niece and nephew in the United States use it to learn French, Spanish, why not Afar? And why not vice versa? But yeah, I guess that's our presentation. But if you guys could contribute in two ways, to be a contributor and to be a beta user.